are back once again. This is the Wu-Tang podcast. It is I, Syndicate Superior. The almighty AR is still on hiatus, but nonetheless, we have a really special interview. For today's show, we have Cyrus Borzorgmehr, the author of Once Upon a Time in Shaolin, the untold story of Wu-Tang Clan's $1 Million secret album, the devaluation of music, and America's new public enemy #1. Cyrus, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah. And as I was just telling you off air, I think this is one of the better hip hop books that I've read in quite a long time. It's just funny and engaging, a really easy read, and I mean you're a pretty great writer, if I do say so myself.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. And before we delve into the book, I was just doing a little bit of research on you, and you are a rather interesting fellow, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, I mean it's been a checkered career, should we say?
Yeah. So okay. So first of all, you I know that you manage hotels, if I'm correct.
Well, we've got a kind of management company. To be honest, my wife handles most of that side of things. But that was when I moved to Marrakesh 12 years ago. Mm-hmm. We kind of walked in. It was very much the Wild West period, where all kinds of investment was coming in and hotels were opening, and it was just something we started doing. They're all quite small. They're all kind of B&B, kind of traditional converted houses. But yeah, so that's definitely one part of the stuff we got going on.
Okay, and then you are one of the founders of Arcadia, which is kind of like this. How would you describe it?
Well, I just got to be clear. I'm not one of the founders. Okay. I'm definitely, I came on about 2-3 years afterwards. Arcadia, we basically create, I guess, sort of immersive environments. Okay. So you've got, our main structure, you've got a 50-ton spider built out of recycled military hardware. So the eyes are jet engines, the arms are helicopter tails, that kind of thing. And we've got moving cranes as arms. It shoots 60-foot fireballs. And we've got a kind of 80-meter sound field, inward-facing sound field. So you kind of step inside and you've got music coming from every direction. You've got acrobats spinning off the spider. You've got lasers, flames going off, that kind of thing.
Wow. Okay. And you're a DJ, right?
Yeah.
Tribe.
Yeah, I came up. That was kind of my background. I came up in the 90s in the illegal rave scene. So kind of that whole same period where kind of Wu-Tang was breaking out in the hip hop world, kind of 93 onwards. We were kind of on the run from the police most of the time, doing pretty large warehouse raves and free festivals and that kind of thing. And yeah. Producing music, DJ'd a lot. So that was definitely kind of a huge part of the 90s, and I've kind of kept my hand in since.
Yeah, I see. I went to your SoundCloud page and checked out some of your DJ sets and everything like that.
Oh, cool.
Yes, interesting stuff. And so you're also, obviously you're an author, which is why you're here. But so you also write fiction, and so you also have a novel out called The Syndicate, right?
Yeah. I kind of it was really weird because when I did Shaolin, mm-hmm. I kind of got to the end of it, and it was weird. It had been such an intense period with so much mad stuff going on, and I kind of wrote the book quite soon after it, while it was all really fresh and quite raw. And then there was like this year-long wait, and so I just thought, you know what, I'm gonna write another one, while I'm in the zone. So yeah, that came out too.
Man, you have a lot going on. And then did you also write the Rabbit Hole too? I saw that on Amazon as well.
I did. I took it down. I mean, to be honest, it was I self-published that like 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And like when I was like kind of between friends. And like when I realized that other stuff was coming out that was going to be taken more seriously, I kind of took it down. It needed a heavy edit. It was one of those ones that I probably should have thought a little bit harder about before I put it out. So, but it was a learning curve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, what I've noticed between all of your writings, your writings on your website and everything like that, and with your novels and with Shaolin in general, is that you are really interested in this kind of sort of cultural imperialism, the legality of institutions and society in general. And I'm curious to know. I can only help but imagine that the illegal rave scene coming up in the 1990s and everything like that. Did that influence your writing and your ideology on certain things?
Yeah, very much so. There was a really key thing about the illegal rave scene. It was a backlash against Margaret Thatcher, who was the British Prime Minister in the 80s, and it was very much a partner to Reagan. So you had heavy deregulation of kind of banks and industries. You had huge crackdowns on kind of subcultural movements, and materialism became sanctified, and what we were doing was a kind of reaction to that. And ironically enough, for where I ended up 20 years later with Shaolin, it was about doing the most revolutionary statement we could make at the time was to make things free, was to take money out of the equation. And so there were two things about it. One, it wasn't economically driven. It was passion driven. That's why everybody was there. Everybody sweated blood, sweat. You put blood, sweat, and tears into it to create something that you just opened up to the people, and you took money completely out of the equation. The second really interesting thing about it was that when you there's this kind of understanding in society that if you don't have security, you will have anarchy. You will have anarchy in the bad sense. And what we noticed that if you took away an official security force, people suddenly started to look after each other in a completely different way. It became a community in a different way to nightclubs at the time and concerts and stuff that was top down, strictly controlled.
Interesting. Now, what's interesting about what you just said about community and trust is also one of the main tenets of Shaolin when it came to the secrecy of the album and just having, at the end of the day, to trust people even beyond certain contractual obligations toward the end, which you kind of get into. And when it comes to just writing in general, before we delve into the book, I'm curious to know, because I know you write poetry also. Do you use a different muscle, do you think, when you write nonfiction and fiction?
It's a weird one, in a way. In fact, I'm more comfortable with nonfiction. I find writing about ideas and concepts easier than developing characters, I must say. So, I mean, I guess some of my characters in fiction are more vehicles for ideas than really kind of nuanced, different characters. And I think there's two very different styles. So I'm trying to get across a series of ideas in what I write in fiction, laced with humor and all that kind of thing. But I wouldn't say I'm a kind of great character developer.
Okay. Well, I will say that what I was kind of surprised about reading Shaolin, going into it, is that there are several angles when it comes to this entire story. So you have Cilvarings, right, who is the pretty much the brain behind this entire project. Starting it, recording it, producing the album, and everything like that. And he's trying to, in so many words, I guess, kind of get his magnum opus, or like that thing that will, kind of cement his legacy. Meanwhile, go ahead.
Yeah, which is really interesting because he ended up doing it in a completely paradoxical way. Because on the one hand, yes, he was trying to do something that would make a difference. On the other hand, all this thing that he put all this time and energy into was kind of going to end up with no one hearing it and him getting lots of criticism, because there was no way he wasn't going to get lots of criticism. No one was going to step back and salute him as a hero for what he was doing.
Yeah. And then you have RZA, who is, of course, the abbot of the Wu-Tang Clan. But however, and all the listeners know about the plan and the 5-year plan and everything like that. And you said that his dictatorship was over with. So he also, he was also playing a role within the clan in which he couldn't exactly just, kind of get them all together under this project. And so it was a really touchy situation between RZA and Cilvarings and trying to even get, all these other people into the notion of even doing a project. And then even when the project, came to be, it still didn't officially have the Wu-Tang, the Wu-Tang stamp on it until relatively late in the process.
Yeah, I mean, there was a line I said in the book, which I think really holds true. I think RZA, when kind of Cilvarings had first approached him to him, I'm not sure how totally seriously he took it at the beginning, both in terms of the idea and as far as making the album was concerned. I don't think RZA even saw it as a Wu-Tang album. Back in 2007 when it started being recorded. It was just like, look, it was more of a mentor situation back then. It was like, go make some music, see what happens. And I think there was an element of giving him just enough oxygen to let the project breathe if there was life, if it was meant to be, but also enough rope to hang himself if it wasn't going to work out. It was like, come back and see me when you got something and we'll talk, So there was like some encouragement there, but I don't think RZA was fully committed right at the beginning, no.
Yeah. And I will say that you do a really good job building up Cilvarings' character within this book because I've been well aware of Cilvarings for a long time. I remember when his first album I came out and everything like that, and yet and still I guess the first few chapters of the book when you're talking about Cilvarings. Some of these things I didn't know. I didn't know the entire story of how he got involved with RZA. Going to New York several times and me going to the Wu-Tang nail salon, which I had no idea existed.
It was a crazy story. And I think, for me, the first time I heard that story, it was just like, Jesus Christ. I mean, I literally couldn't believe it. And I think, when I met RZA and got to know RZA and, we've been in situations where we're talking about it, I think that really cemented him in RZA's mind. RZA had, 100 rappers coming through, 100 kids that wanted to get with the clan. But I think the combination of his just outright stubborn determination and the fact that his path took it into RZA's family before it came to RZA, I think because he'd had contact with his mother, his sister, that kind of thing, I think that created a kind of tenderness that RZA had for him as well, that he gave him time. He made a kind of place for him in his head.
Mm-hmm. Now, when it came to all the media rollout and the firestorm surrounding Once Upon a Time in Shaolin, Cilvarings, I feel like in a lot of ways he kind of got flack, especially in the beginning, and it seemed to me that in some of the outlets, in some of these news outlets, no one really exactly took him seriously. I recall, people just labeling him as a Wu-Tang superfan and not really understanding the extent to his, his connections with RZA and everything like that and the clan overall. So was that one of the reasons as to why you decided to really spend time building up Cilvarings and really telling his story?
I think that played a part in it. He was very sanguine. I remember at the time he was getting all this flack, and I was pretty aware that I wouldn't be dealing with it half as well as he was. And he was pretty philosophical about it. But I think there was two or three things. I think it was really easy to just dismiss it. I think it was really easy because a lot of people just didn't like this project. It was never going to be a fan favorite, what was going on here. And I think having this kind of Cilvarings, who the hell's he? He's just a kind of hanger on. What's going on? It was easier to put him down, I think, in a lot of ways than it was to kind of take the whole thing seriously. And I think that I think that story of how he got with the clan, I think that it was like this, the whole thing was just like this really weird remix of the American Dream, where, this kind of Moroccan dude with glasses from kind of Holland ends up by sheer force of will, ends up being taken seriously by RZA, starts to slowly evolve his own identity after he kind of got past that period of just trying to prove himself as a kind of, I'm just like you guys. And, I think he started to develop his own identity. And I think the more that happened, the more RZA respected him for it. And this all happened kind of behind the scenes. And I think that for a lot of people who didn't necessarily know that much about him, he just suddenly popped up as the kind of, architect, co-producer of this really dubious thing. And it was when you're angry at an idea, it's really easy to focus your dislike on someone you don't really know much about or understand and doesn't necessarily fit. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think without knowing the backstory, it's easy to come to those conclusions.
Yeah, most definitely. And, and also, I never knew that, or I never would have thought that Cilvarings had certain certain ideas about his first album. Just like him not exactly caring for it at the end, and just really thinking that the only reason why it got the attention that it did was because he managed to get like the entire clan on the album in general.
Yeah, I think he had some confidence issues. I mean, that album, I think it was one of those things that I think he was so high on life and having been accepted and having been given this opportunity. And I think he started off going, how can I be as Wu-Tang as possible in kind of what I do, what I say, in just how I approach this, just how spiritually I kind of take this album on. And the problem is you can't feed into something that isn't your identity, it isn't your reality. Mm-hmm. And so by the time his album actually came out, the lyrical content had changed significantly and reflected more of who he was and what he had to say. But I think that as that was happening, and as he was becoming more confident in himself, I actually think that, weirdly enough, it wasn't insecurity that made him question his own kind of whether he should actually be the one fronting as a rapper. I think actually it was a form of confidence that allowed him to admit that to himself without feeling, that was it, his shot was gone, that he had other ways to contribute.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously he did it in a very big way. And when it came to writing the book, like throughout this entire process, over the years, did you have a journal or something like that to write down like your ideas and what was like happening in the music world around you and everything like that as this entire process went on? No, not at all. It was really weird. I had written like 3 or 4 articles for like a website, a kind of dance music website in Holland. Really ironically, because I've got nothing to do with Holland. It was an English dude out of Berlin who got me to write for this website. And this, having come from kind of, a different part of the music industry, dance music, rave music, that kind of thing, seeing what was happening there, I'd already come to some of these conclusions about what was wrong. I certainly hadn't come anywhere near the idea of what, someone wanted to do about it. But I kind of already came to the table with those ideas. I'd already kind of thought through them and analyzed them. And during the process where we were doing this whole thing, I had no idea I was going to write a book. And a couple of times Cilvarings said to me, you should write a book when this is finished. I was dead against it. I was like, no, I'm too close to this. I don't want to do it. It'll be weird. Can't we just get, is there a journalist, someone objective that can do this? And then when I did my knee in, I was literally, I couldn't move for like a month. And I just thought, you know what? I'm going to start writing the first page and see where this goes. And it just wrote itself in a very short space of time. It was very close to while this was all still happening. And I wrote the book I wrote the book in most, like 2/3 of it, there and then, in like even before it was Martin Shkreli's name came out. And then I kind of wrote the rest of it, the kind of last few chapters, once that had happened. And I think being so close to the time, and it all still being really fresh, and it was a combination of I could be more objective than the guy. I could be more objective than Cilvarings and Rizzo because, it wasn't my name on the block. But at the same time, I was deep in enough that I was emotionally engaged and really quite passionate about it. And I actually think it was important to write it then. If I wrote it now, I don't think it would have the same flow. It was, we'd lived and felt and had those highs and lows at the time. And that was the perfect time to write it. Yeah, so when it comes to, so you are this outsider, right? So you're this outsider because, you admitted in the book that you're not really you were never like a big hip hop guy, right? Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But at the same time, though, you're still a part of, just based on, you advising Cilvarings and Rizzo when it came to everything. And I think that generally all 3 of you guys are on the same wavelength when it comes to different philosophies and everything like that. But what's interesting is that you say that you did not hear the entire album. You didn't hear the album in its entirety. No, I never did. I still haven't. And it was even burned on my computer. And I watched it go into iTunes, and I had this sort of split second of do I keep it? And it was like, that's just a lawsuit waiting to happen. And deleted it. And it was really weird. Because I'm not a big hip hop guy, and I think this actually helped. I think if I'd been a massive Wu-Tang fan, I would have
approach the whole thing differently. But I approached it in a kind of quite an abstract sense. As far as I was concerned, I was dealing with a set of ideas. We were dealing with a set of ideas. And it's like the weirdest, most hypocritical statement going. But for a project that was about the music, that's the whole point. It was about the music. I was scared to listen to the music because that would stop it just being these abstract concepts about value and about, all these different, how we perceive music and art. And it would become a 2 hour and 7 minute hip hop album. And I didn't know enough. I know some hip hop. I was more into kind of, late 80s, early 90s hip hop, kind of Eric B. and Rakim, NWA, Public Enemy, that kind of thing. So, I like hip hop, but I wouldn't be able to tell you. I wouldn't be able to say if this was A-Star, if this was not, if this was anything like that. And because I wasn't like, I've got so many friends who are Wu-Tang fans going, "You crazy. What? How could you not have listened to it?" And it's just like, that kind of wasn't that wasn't my job. It wasn't my role here. And I felt weird doing it. And also, weirdly enough, with all the weird subterfuges that kind of went on towards the back end of the project, we just didn't want to lie that much. And, the line was only 2 people had listened to this in its entirety. And I kind of wanted to keep it that way. And actually, that was what was such a rush, that the first time I heard it was literally in the sound check at PS1. Mm-hmm. And even then, I was looking at how other people were reacting to it. I was so nervous about how this would be received that my focus was on watching other people's faces.
I mean, I don't know. There's just so many ways I can go. All kinds of questions. So this is one question I have. So, are the masters to Once Upon a Time in Shaolin they don't exist, right?
They don't exist.
They don't exist. So. And this is one thing I do have a question about when it comes to the back end of the book.
Yeah.
Okay, so toward the final chapters, you were scaring the shit out of me when it came to you guys lugging the boxes onto the air throughout the airport.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no other way to do it. I mean, it was one of those things. What do you do with your laptop? You put it in hand luggage. What do you do with the thing that's most precious to you? You keep it with you. The idea of shipping it from Morocco to New York, where any million things could have happened. It was no, this is going to have to go in hand luggage, and we're going to have to go in it. And then there was that sort of catalogue of catastrophe where, because there was an extra box. That was the thing. That box and all the photos, the main box, there's another one. A big leather and wood box that's to keep that in. It's like a transport thing. And that's what the paperwork was for. Through God knows what miscommunication. So there we are in JFK with a customs dude going, you've got 3 silver boxes, but you've got paperwork for this leather thing. And he's already unimpressed. And then he's going, okay, open it then. At which point, I realized, because I'm on my own at this point, Cilvarings in the holding room being pulled up, and I suddenly realized we don't have a key. And I mean, it's just kind of turning into an Abbott and Costello sketch at this point. But you know what? These are the kind of things that emotionally engage me in this project. Is that this wasn't for a lot of people who looked at this project, I think they thought it was this kind of PR publicity stunt, cash grab kind of thing, and it really wasn't. It actually reminded me of my roots in the illegal rave scene. It was a completely DIY project, and even though there were kind of 7-figure numbers at stake, and you had one of the most legendary hip hop producers in the game doing it, there was no external people, there was no PR firms. We did our own legal stuff by and large. It kind of felt like a street move. It really did, and I know that might sound ironic. But that's why I think that is the element of it that made me really, really emotionally engaged with it instead of just being quite a detached advisor.
Mm-hmm. But when it came to, and I mean, I get it, I guess traveling, getting the boxes across the globe, I guess it really isn't any other way you could do it. But when it comes to, just when you guys were carrying those boxes, were you guys worried at, devaluing the entire project overall if it got messed up?
Yeah, I'm terrified. I mean, absolutely terrified. But it was like, at this point, we developed a kind of bunker mentality as well, where we just, like, we were in so deep that, like, you know, if it happened on our watch, that was our responsibility. The idea of, like, giving it to DHL or some art shipping company, like, and letting it out of our hands, that was even more of a loss of kind of control. And that, you know, we'd rather, you know, yes, we were concerned about something going wrong, but at least it would be down to us, and we would be there on the spot if and when something happened and take responsibility for it. So the less anyone else had to do with it, the kind of safer we felt.
Now, so the actual CD, so you guys didn't have the CD, and in Cilvarings, he recorded like a 15-minute like medley of the album for people to listen to in New York. But
yeah.
So is the CD like I guess like an actual like CD, or is it something? Does it have like silver on it or something like that? Or
no. It's a double CD. It's two CDs, and they're like printed. So they're like printed like a store-bought CD, you know, with the name and all that kind of thing, and some artwork. But you know, it was the irony was that you could go through all these lavish layers of packaging to make it special, but when push comes to shove, physical music is a plastic CD or a piece of wax. There's just no getting away. You can't dress that up. You can't have a solid gold CD. You know, and in many ways, that was the joker in the pack, because what we were really, you know, for a lot of people, the value was about the box, the value was about this, the value was about the hype. The point was that what you were really selling were two pieces of plastic with the music on it. And that was what we were trying to reattach value to. And the rest of it was really a kind of a set of arrows trying to point into these two things that people didn't seem to value anymore, that had kind of gone digital. And it's just going, do you know what? Pieces of plastic are, you know, have huge amounts of value because of the art that's engraved into them, you know, and we should respect that generally more. We shouldn't have to put it in a silver box.
Now, yeah, but I mean, did you guys like ever like have like a deep debate on whether it should be on vinyl or if it should be on cassette or something? Well, I guess maybe not cassette, but like or CD or some other kind of medium?
Yes, there was a debate about vinyl. I actually think one of the, I mean, that wasn't my call. And I was less involved in that specific debate, to be fair. I think it just ended up working better as a package, and it just ended up. I don't think there was a philosophical message in that. It's just how it panned out. It was just easier and more effective to do with dimensions to the box, that kind of thing. What we could do with it.
Now, all throughout the book, you know, while you guys are having this kind of roller coaster of several years, which is very interesting. You all throughout you're talking about the changing landscape in music between, you know, the Tidal, streaming, Taylor Swift, and everything like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess you do describe it in the book, but I guess just like vocally, like how was that? Like how ironic was it to you? Like all these things were happening as you guys were trying to have this kind of really special project trying to bring back the value of music. Meanwhile, the devaluation of music was slowly increasing, per se.
It was really weird. It was, I think, you know, I looked at it two ways. Half of it was that, exactly like you say. Like, there was just more and more kind of streaming things and free things and all that kind of thing. The U2 thing, for example, you know, let's just give this album away for free whether you like it or not kind of thing. You know, you're having it. But at the same time, what was interesting is that everyone was just experimenting. No one knew what to do, you know, whether it's U2, Wu-Tang, Jay-Z. No one knew how to deal with the changing landscape. And everyone was trying experiments, you know. And everyone was trying to find some way to help kind of put a bridle on where the future of this thing was going. And so actually, in some ways, that was reassuring because everyone was just, you know, everyone was in the same boat. No one had the answer. And from us trying to do this kind of, you know, uber physical kind of, you know, make this really strong point about physicality and value and recorded music, and others were going, well, look, the landscape's changed. How are we going to make sure that you know, we can find a way that artists can survive off that? So in some ways, I think U2's, I think, was the most cynical move. That I didn't think was cool at all. I think Jay-Z, for example, was just, he was trying to address the changing musical landscape and not just leave it all to to Spotify or, it was how can we as a culture or they as a culture have some influence on where this is going instead of just being a victim to it.
Do you think that people have figured out the music landscape yet, or do you think that we're still struggling with trying to figure it out?
I think we're still struggling. I think the biggest problem going is how a new guy gets heard. Like when I was in the 90s, you'd go to a record store, right? Mm-hmm. I'm talking about dance music. You drum and bass or jungle or something. You go in, the guy would have 10 records from each subgenre, and you just skip through. And if you were a guy who no one had ever heard of, you had no promotional budget, you had no nothing, as long as you could raise that money to press up 500 tunes on vinyl and walk around record shops and give them to them, those record shops would play them to people who came in. You had a shot. I think the real problem now is that you can be on Spotify or Beatport or iTunes really easily. No one's ever going to find you. There's tens of thousands of new releases. And so it's like, unless there's some form of patronage, it's like that weird contradiction that with the internet, digitality was supposed to liberate us from all of this. It was supposed to level the playing field so the dude in his bedroom had the same shot as Warner Brothers, because distribution had been democratized. And what we've ended up with is that, yes, that's true, but there's now, the influence still plays as strong a role as ever, if not more, because the only way you're going to get heard above the crowd is either by some ingenious kind of marketing ploy or money or promotional money. And so in terms of breaking, in terms of democratizing landscape, and even in terms of as a DJ, when I go and look for new music, it's a nightmare. If I'm playing techno and breakbeat or something like that, I go to a new releases page on Beatport and I go through the new releases. I just can't do it. So I end up being reliant on charts and recommendations and that kind of thing. I simply cannot wade through the thousands and thousands of new releases. And I think saturation's as much of a problem as people not paying for music. I think that if there was a way to reshape the economics, but it be fair, we might get somewhere. Maybe streaming is going to, maybe streaming will inevitably be the way to go. I don't know, but I still don't see how raw talent from the street is going to get through unless they've got unless they've got patronage of some kind.
Yeah, I recall. I think maybe in the middle of the book, you do talk about like these tastemakers and like the whole like Apple buying Beats, and you have Beats Radio, or I guess whatever this shit's called now, and these different kinds of playlists and these tastemakers that are supposed to pretty much tell us, like what's hot or something like that. And I guess in many ways we've always had that with the DJ breaking like a song or whatever like that, but it just seems way more complicated, and now branding is becoming more of a thing in which, I get it, and not to say that that artists haven't had brands, period, but, if you have someone coming from the streets, right? A lot of musicians, they aren't business people, and, they don't exactly care about a brand, they just care about their music, which then I would imagine, by them focusing on branding and, and their influence would discourage them from, going outside of their usual musical landscape and not want to, explore different sounds as much.
I think that's very true. I think that's very true. Here's the thing. It's really weird. If you try and pitch something now, if you try and pitch a movie or try and pitch a book, right? You generally try and say it's like this, something that people have already heard of. Or it's a mix of this and this, two things that people have already heard of. You keep trying to justify what you've done by referencing something that's already been done, in order to get someone to go, well, that's sold. Okay, I'm going to pay attention to this. And I think this is the other thing. Musicians, exactly like you say, you can't just be a musician anymore. You have to be a musician. You have to be a marketer. You have to be a manager. You have to be a label manager. It doesn't stop at producing a piece of music. If you want to succeed and you don't have a kind of organization around you, you have to do all of those things. And that isn't necessarily the right way. A true creative soul isn't necessarily going to be able to do all of that kind of thing. And they shouldn't be able to. They produce something amazingly creative, but they just don't know what to do with it. And that's a real problem as well.
Literally yesterday, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but RZA has like this thing with Chipotle where
I've heard something vaguely about it. Yeah.
So he partnered up with Chipotle, and he made sounds that reflected like their ingredients. So like soybeans, like onions. So like he's doing like guitar flicks or like like drum rolls or whatever like that. And they put them all they put like the stems all out on like SoundCloud. You can download them and then you can like make things with them. And so with that, there's like a Wu-Tang mix. So RZA has made something with Wu-Tang, and then I think maybe like 2 other mixes, which I found really, really weird. But that's not to say that RZA's always done like interesting ventures like that, in general. And, I guess a quick aside here, ironically enough, I bought Chipotle later that day. So
it's a really good. The thing is, my experience was, he's the kind of guy that someone will just come up to him and, if they just say, look, go and advertise Chipotle, all right? Mm-hmm. He might just say, talk to my business manager, something like that. He won't take it that seriously. He won't engage with it. If there's like, right, how can we do something really creative and weird? Let's pretend it's not an ad, right? Let's just see. I actually think that's quite an interesting concept. It's weird. I mean, definitely weird. I agree, but I also think that for him, it's like, well, that's an interesting creative challenge. That's something I haven't done before. That's something I can get my teeth into. I mean, I think that is the kind of thing that would press his buttons in a kind of creative way, because it's just like, how the hell do you, create sound for, onion sauce or whatever?
Yeah, and I felt pretty vulnerable when I went to Chipotle that same day. I didn't realize like the connection between listening to like the Wu-Tang mix and like listening to all the sounds with like different ingredients until I was like right there and the guy was making like my food for me, which I found really kind of disturbed by, because then I guess maybe like listening to all the sounds had some kind of weird influence unconsciously, which maybe
And it's a touch and go on whether that was a positive or a negative. Whether you've basically just been done by advertising, and that was just you've been subliminally had because Chipotle's been put in your subconscious and therefore you found yourself in Chipotle, or if it actually will affect your experience of something as mundane as eating some fast food.
Yes, very true, and this is something that you and Silva, you guys were fighting all throughout these different creative agencies, the whole Samsung idea, which actually I found pretty interesting as you were explaining it, but then toward the end I could see your point as to why it could go wrong.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the bottom line is, I'm pretty anti-corporate. As personally, the other two guys, Cyrus Borzorgmehr, don't see the world quite the same way. I'm pretty like that. It is part of the landscape. It is part of kind of in the musical, if you want revenue, it comes from these other places apart from recorded music now. But I think specifically on this project, I think it would have just been, you've gone out on such a limb to make this point about an art piece, a single art piece, this rare thing. The second a brand name goes near that, I just thought that's just it. Then you really are a publicity stunt. Then you really, you haven't had the courage of your convictions. Mm-hmm. That it's just the most conventional move you can kind of do these days. And I mean, I kind of like the weird thing is the Chipotle thing. It is actually creatively interesting. There is something to be had there, both for the guy creating the sound and to see if that actually rings true with you when you're actually engaging with the food. I think just slapping a brand name on the Shaolin album in any kind of way would have been really weird and quite tawdry.
And because you vaguely mentioned, which I understand that you guys got some calls from like record labels, but when it came to the record labels, I guess eventually distribution would be a thing for them, but I could just imagine that because since record labels they build these legacies of being like I guess like Sub Pop and Nirvana or something like that they maybe a record label would just want it so they could just say, yeah, we have the Once Upon a Time in Shaolin album, and maybe not even want to distribute it. But when it came to some of these record labels, did they actually have any ideas as to what they would want to do with it, or were they just want to keep it?
No, not really. A lot of this stuff came in very early on, like really early on, when I don't think people had fully understood what was going on. I think, the weird thing is, when something has massive press, even the most professional, sensible people lose their mind and want to jump on and get a piece of that bandwagon while it's hot. And I don't think any of them had, it was only two, maybe three that were seriously, that had got in touch. I don't think they had any idea. They just wanted to have their foot in it. They just wanted to be like there to be part of whatever happened because this was big news. This was the biggest album news anyone had heard in a very long time. Nothing had got this much hype. Therefore, we need to be in at the front of the queue. Otherwise, it might be someone else. And I don't think they'd fully engaged with the ideas or really knew what was going on. That was my feeling.
When it comes, this is the thing about Wu-Tang that always fascinates me. Like, and I think this is also because of the fact that it's just a big ass group. You have just not 8, 9 different personalities, and every so often, no matter, they could not even come out with an album. There's always something about Wu-Tang in the press, whether if it's a Wu-Tang affiliate and the whole, penis debacle, or if it's like this weird idea about an album, issues with RZA and Raekwon. There's always something going on within the world of Wu-Tang, and it just never ceases to amaze me. And then, I'm reading this book which comes out of nowhere, and then next thing I know, I see RZA, doing things with Chipotle. It's just a weird fascinating. And this is the thing that fascinates me about Wu-Tang is the fact that how they can stay relevant in these different ways.
It's a really weird one. It was again something I said in the book. Like if Kanye had tried to do this, it would have been taken differently. It would have just been bling, ego. He thinks he's Shakespeare again, that kind of thing. I think with Wu-Tang, there's an integrity, even with all the fighting, all the kind of dramas and soap operas over the years. There is something that made people, even the most skeptical people, step back and give it a chance. There is an air of something I can't quite put my finger on that even not as a dedicated fan, I definitely felt. And it's an edginess. It's this kind of dance between a kind of edgy kind of discord and a sort of volatile explosiveness to moments of really kind of transcendental creative insight. And I think that, I can't put my finger on it, but I totally know what you mean. And somehow that has lasting appeal. It has a lasting kind of hold on the public consciousness.
Nowadays, you see people with Wu-Tang shirts. I work at university, and they'll come to the classroom. They have Wu-Tang shirts, so I'm like, oh, you listen to Wu-Tang, and sometimes they'll say, oh no. And it's just a symbol. It's just the idea of it, which fascinates people, which I'm amazed by. And when it comes to all three of you guys is business savvy, RZA, you, and Cilvarings, the whole Boombotics thing too. Like I had, I remember when it came out, and the idea of A Better Tomorrow being embedded within the speakers, and I had no idea I didn't even think about it that was probably related in some shape or form to the Once Upon a Time in Shaolin project.
I mean, it was weird. I mean, I don't think it's one of those things. I don't think it was directly related, but just those ideas are just going around RZA's head. They're just going around RZA. So, and I think I guess in the wider sense, definitely those ideas, and it came back to that idea of, and I think the key to the Boombotics thing were the 2 tracks in there. The 2 extra tracks that never leaked. Yeah. And that was the really fascinating part. That's when you know if it's worked or not. That's when you know if you've got a solid anti-piracy measure on your hand. And it's, and anti-piracy, that sounds like a one-way thing, but it's also something that gives it value, makes it feel special to you. If what you've bought is all over the internet, you're not part of the story. It's not yours. It's not your direct connection to the artist. It's not like your thing of value that you've got on your shelf anymore. And I think that was really interesting. Now, whether it's right to confine how a specific speaker or not, that's a totally different debate, and I think a very fair one to have. But it was, again, it kind of goes back to this thing. Everyone's just trying new ideas. And I mean, I don't know if we'll look back at this time as the time where the kind of music industry imploded, or whether it was like one of these really volatile transition periods where, you know, people were dealing with changing realities, and a set of ideas will come out of this eventually that takes us into a new generation. I don't think we know which way it's going to go yet.
Yeah, well, I can see maybe 10 years from now, maybe people saying, you know, embedding music in speakers probably not the greatest idea in the world, or, you know, maybe that could be something that becomes a thing. You know, you think about the 80s and how the technology was changing, and so how like some of the sounds just kind of sounded shitty, like the early 2000s with the Triton keyboard, and how I just can't stand the sounds from that thing. But nonetheless, though, when it comes to RZA in general, because I know I had to let you go soon. Toward the end, when you guys like pretty much like the deal was made and everything like that, and you was talking about like you, Cilvarings, and RZA just like walking through the village in New York and everything like that. What was that experience like, just walking with RZA in the street, like in the streets, and going to like a bar, like a dive bar with him?
It was so random. It really was so random. And it was this, and like, we'd just come out of this like really high end dinner as well, which is what made it much better. You know what I mean? So we just kind of had this dinner, with, you know, Alexander Jones, head of the auction house, these kind of, you know, high society New York types. And that had been like one reality. And then I really did think RZA was going to go home after that, you know, it's midnight, you know, etc. And he's like, no, man, let's go out. It's just like, and the fact that there was no plan, that there was no limo, that there was no, you know, there was no kind of, you know, high-end club. It was, again, it was just like that, you know, we're just on a random night out in New York. But then that's punctuated by every 5 meters, someone's going, Wu-Tang, RZA, like, except for the doorman, who just like, you know, what the hell do you want? And like the fact that it was just like shockingly awful inside the club, but it was great. It was just comedy, and it just added to that whole thing that this project had felt from the start, that in a weird way it was so organic. It wasn't that slick. You know what I mean? It was just and by the time, seriously, the temple thing, man. Honestly,
yeah.
I am not joking, right? He's going right. I've called my friend the monk, and literally, I'm thinking, what's that code for? I mean, it just never even occurred to me. It's 2 a.m. on a Saturday night in the village. It's like, right, we're going. I'm so, okay. He's going, no, it's a monk. And I'm thinking, all right, this I've got to see. And I kind of walk into this space, man, and it's, for a start, it's full of people. Like, what the hell, man? It's a dojo stroke temple full of people at 2 o'clock in the morning of all these random different kinds of, you know, you've got kind of Chinese kung fu fighters, kind of Montenegrin dudes, people playing chess. And it's like all this stuff that I had obviously learned about kind of, you know, the Wu-Tang mythology and symbolism of the chess and the martial arts and Shaolin, all of that kind of thing. You're just watching it all play out in a microcosm of total reality. And like there's RZA sat on the floor of this temple playing chess with this dude, as these weird, really strong Chinese spirits are wheeled out. And it was just one of those utterly surreal moments where you just step back and just think, Jesus Christ, really? And it was really lovely. It was one of those things, actually, RZA felt really at home next. Like he was very kind of cool with everybody in the street and everything. You know, he was nice, but he was nice in I've got to be nice to the fans kind of, I'm just a politeness kind of nice. But like when we were in the temple, it's just like he was totally at home, and like no one cared who he was. I mean, no one was badgering him or trying to talk to her or anything like that. It was all so laid back, and it was a wonderful window. I think it was really special for me to see that, having spent like 2 years on the kind of, you know, the business side and the conceptual side of this, to actually kind of actually get a window into that world, into his world and the people around him. And yeah, that was absolutely fascinating.
A good I think one of the biggest takeaways from the book was the fact that, you know, you're in this like the Shaolin Temple Community Center thing, and you know you have monks who are drinking, and then you pretty much like tell like a little historical tidbit about, you know, when drinking became allowed.
Yeah, now I've only got the monk there's version word for that. I've tried to look this up. I tried to Google that, and I couldn't find any actual other evidence, confirmed supporting evidence for it. But yeah, that was the version. Because I was really shocked. You know, I thought it was going to be all kind of veganism and meditation. And you know, here it was, 2 a.m. with, you know, bottles of spirits, whiskey flying around the place. You know, hip hop blasting out the speakers, and the monk at the center of it. That was the weird thing. Like, he was totally cool. You definitely felt the vibe of him, that, you know, a really kind of intense purity, but, you know, but at the same time, it was totally cool to be kind of getting drunk and listening to tunes. It was interesting. It was definitely not what I expected. And that was the version. I was like, really? How is this possible? What's the deal? I'd always assumed, maybe I'm culturally uninformed, that, you know, drinking wasn't a thing. Like, you know, the word monk just doesn't go with alcohol. But yeah, so there we go. And so that's, I mean, you know, as I say, I couldn't confirm it, but like, he's very open about it. It's not like it was any secret or like, don't tell anyone. You know, he was like, no, this is totally cool. This is the deal. This is how it is.
And this was like the first time that you heard 36 Chambers, like in this, I guess, within this realm.
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, look, I'm sure I'd heard bits of it, you know, just because it just filtered through my consciousness over 20 years. But like, it was just that real comedy moment where I'm going, this is really good, this music, and they just start laughing at me. You know, it was just like the most ridiculous thing. And I think I think the guys in the tower put it on, and but it was that was a real comedy moment and a really lovely moment, and it actually meant. You see, the thing is, if I had been, as not the biggest Wu-Tang fan, you know, I've not been that familiar with the music. If I'd sat there and tried to listen to 36 Chambers or by myself in my flat, in my apartment, while we were doing all of this, like, it would have been a really inorganic process. I'd be like trying to engage with it because I'm working with these guys, and, you know, I've got to try and understand this music, and I'd be going in on quite a linear level and quite a, you know, surface level of just trying to sort of logically deconstruct it so it makes sense to me. But like, the fact that I actually had my experience of kind of Wu-Tang music by myself, like, I engaged with the music without knowing what it was, and, you know, was really feeling it in that environment, that made it really special for me.
The thing about you, like you and Cilvarings, like, I would imagine that, you know, over the course of all these years, like, you guys are probably like really good friends now, and yet you guys seem like polar opposites.
Totally, and I think that's why it worked. I honestly think, you know, I would have been, you know, I wouldn't, you know, A was his, you know, he was driving it all, it was his plan, but like, you know, we fit. It was the yin and yang thing of why this worked. And we'd built a level of trust that we could literally have full-blown shouting matches about what, you know, this issue. And it wouldn't be weird. It wouldn't affect our underlying trust or relationship. And that's a really special position to be in with another human being, where you can voice your views that intensely. But at no point is it taken the wrong way, or does it affect any kind of underlying vibe. And I think if we hadn't had that, this would have gone wrong. Because a lot of what went on, you know, a lot of the kind of minutiae, like, we'd have to have argued it out and hammered up, or at least come up with conflicting positions or something, and then go and chat to Riz about it, because especially if we lived in the same town, you know? Mm-hmm. So we'd have a lot of these discussions and have massive arguments first, before we even ended up chatting to Riz about it. You know, so, and we still are very good friends, you know, and, you know, there's a trust there. And, you know, he's a totally different person to me, but you've kind of been through something this intense and come out the other side with trust intact. That's saying something.
Do you think, I mean, well, I really think that trust is probably one of the biggest elements within this book, between the relationships between, you know, RZA, you know, you gaining RZA's trust, you and Cilvarings having this relationship, and then the evolution of the legalities involving the album and just the logistics of trying to have people listen to it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that was it. It was like there was a couple of points where there just wasn't any more protections you could build in. And one of the classic ones was PS1, where, all right, you can search everyone at the door who's coming in, but, you know, really, the guys that are setting it up, are you really going to diss them by searching them? You can't, man. You just can't. That's just so massively uncool. So, trust. And it was such a liberating feeling. It was such a nice, human, warm feeling to go, do you know what? We trust you. Especially when you've been in this bunker mentality. You know, you've gone through all kinds of ridiculous hoops that a mastering engineer can't have the whole album at the same time, you know, that kind of thing. And even with Martin Shkreli, of all people, but you kind of reach this point where, okay, it just boiled down to that basic point that's in the book. It's like, he needs to be able to have some recourse if we are playing him. And he pays what he signs a check, and 30 seconds later the album gets released for free. All the fans love the Wu. He's been screwed. You know, score one for the hustle. That's that. You know, so he needed some protection against that, and we needed protection against the fact that, hang on, if we gave him the right to sue us for that, what's to stop him leaking it? What's to stop him leaking it, blaming us? So that took like 2 months to figure out. And it boiled down. We built in various levels of 16 bars, whatever, you know, 16 bars leaks, then you get X, you know, 32 bars, you get Y. But ultimately, you know, we didn't know about the Daraprim thing at the time. But even still, you're dealing with some dude you've had one phone call with, 2 phone calls with, and their lawyers. And after all this secrecy, you kind of end up having to sort of trust each other because no one can really sue anyone else because that just won't work.
I was looking at one of your articles that really revolved around notions of like the legal system and everything like that. And it's just so funny that, you know, like when things become so legal that it just breaks down anyway, you just kind of create this big ass paradox that, you know, whereas it you know, when you just keep building in all these protections, everything in certain ways just becomes null and void over time.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And, you know, I think that's kind of a healthy thing. You know, like we try as, you know, our kind of, you know, especially the Western kind of view of society. We try and logically construct 1,000,000,001 frameworks to kind of, you know, to channel how events might happen and prepare for every eventuality. But so often the human experience just won't fit in those boxes.
Did you ever at times like felt like just turning away because of the fact that in many ways being a part of this project, the secrecy and the legalities of it all, that it just didn't really fit with, you know, some of your core beliefs, and especially coming from the illegal, like, you know, UK rave scene?
Let's put it this way. I mean, when I first heard about it, I was absolutely horrified. I thought it was the worst idea I'd ever heard. I was very reticent. I think there's 2 or 3 things that shifted my perception on that. One, I really felt a bond and trust with RZA and Cilvarings. And I didn't feel like I was part of some horrible PR corporate hustle. I didn't feel that at all. It felt like 2 guys making a statement. And it wouldn't have been my statement, but the more I thought about it, I was with them. I was with them as far as the diagnosis was concerned. As far as the kind of cure was concerned, I would never have been my cure. But I found it very, very interesting. And the more I thought about it, the more ideas it threw up that I thought were really valid. And I think it's key that at no point did this project say that this was the answer. You know, I think that would have been more complex. I think that would have turned me away more. If it was like, right, guys, private albums, that's the way it's going to run from now on. You know, this is it. We're not, you know, screw the fans from now on. This is how we're going to play it. I would have stepped away. But it wasn't that. It was like, let's just do this one-off experiment that's more of a question than an answer, and see, like, kind of roll this ball into the middle of this fray and see where it lands. And on that basis, I was much happier to engage with it as a kind of experiment that wasn't claiming to be, you know, have you know, right on its side. It was just a really interesting experiment.
How do you feel about Jay-Z's recent album and yet another kind of weird deal that he did with Sprint?
The thing is, I mean, that's, you know, that's totally not my thing. I didn't like the featuring deal, but that's, you know, I don't know if I criticize him for it, because he's trying to be innovative in a very difficult landscape, and his innovative solution is working with corporations. And that, you know, 90% of the world thinks like that. It's not. I don't. It fits. It works within the contemporary paradigm. And for a lot of people, working with businesses doesn't cheapen the artistic product. I happen to think it does. But I don't think it's any kind of hypocrisy on his part. I think he's genuinely trying to be innovative. And I think a lot of people agree with him that that's true. I mean, then when that Samsung deal broke, everyone was hailing him as a genius. It wasn't my thing at all. But I just think that because it's so screwed up, people are trying to find solutions. And I don't think he's. Yeah, it jars with me, the corporate thing, but I don't think he's exploiting anyone. And I think he's trying his best.
Finally, when it comes to this book, and I've been reading, I've read like a little bit of, I guess people writing about the book in various publications and outlets. Do you and I feel this way? Do you think that people overall have kind of misunderstood the project overall, and even this book so far?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think part of the reason for the book was because the project was misunderstood, and it's fair for it to be misunderstood because there wasn't actually that much communication during it about this. I think that part of it was to basically to explain, because it hadn't been, the kind of layers beneath it hadn't really been explained. So I don't think that's anyone's fault. The problem, I think, with the book that came out is that, instantly the tabloids cherry-picked a couple of ridiculous lines that I wasn't even saying. I was, the whole kind of, Wu-Tang fans put out a hit on Martin Shkreli thing. That was so cherry-picked. That's not what I was saying. That's not what I was saying. It was just that, he'd gone so far off the reservation that we could no longer control. He had taken things to a situation where he'd gone way over the line, and we weren't sure what was going to happen. And, that was a speculation of a worst case scenario. So instantly, the way it's reflected in the press, it's like that this is a kind of, juicy tell-all about the Martin Shkreli thing, absolutely ignoring what the book's really about. And I did this interview with New York Magazine, and the guy just clearly didn't believe me. He just didn't believe the book, and he completely misquoted me. He had me saying it was a publicity stunt and all that kind of thing, which I was really pissed off about. I mean, I expected better from an outlet like that. But he'd come in. I mean, I just remember being on the phone to him, and he was very skeptical, and I was so thrown by that because I kind of felt I'd been really quite upfront in the book, and I'd addressed the rights and the wrongs, and he sort of asked me, what do you say with all the scheming that went on in this book? What do you say that this book is just another part of the plan? I was so taken aback, I just didn't even know what to say, so I kind of made some wisecrack, and that clearly didn't make the situation better, and it just kind of unraveled from there. The problem is, I don't think, the nicest things people have said to me about the book were, it wasn't what I was expecting, and I really enjoyed it. And I don't think it is, because I think that with all the kind of tabloid hype about this, when a book, the way like this comes out, people think that it's some kind of merchandising tie-in or something, trying to cash in on something, and it's going to be quite a kind of cheap tabloid version of, dealing with, the notorious villain Martin Shkreli. And it actually takes people reading it to kind of see that it's not that, or hearing it from friends.
Yeah, again, I was rather surprised, and honestly, you don't really spend that much time talking about Martin Shkreli that much. To me, I mean, it's a much more complex story and about the legalities of music, and I mean, and how you said it, and how everyone is trying to figure it out in the industry, even some of these label executives, and also just the weird, crazy people out there anyway. Like the guy from Nigeria who offered $7 million worth of livestock to you guys, some shit.
I mean, I still don't know if that was a joke or not, but it was just so classic. I mean, literally, it was like a really solemn, formal email. It was classic.
Yeah. Well, I hope nonetheless, although with a lot of these certain media outlets just really talking about the book as a scheme, or the schemes that were a part of the project, I hope that at least this interview can shed a little bit of light on the nuance and the complexities that actually are within the book when it comes to Wu-Tang, Cilvarings and, his story and just music in general.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's been a brilliant interview. I mean, definitely the best I've done. So, I mean, thank you. It was great to actually talk about like the real stuff behind it.
All right, well, thanks so much. And this has been another. Oh, well, actually, I shouldn't say that. Actually, where can people find you, and what other projects do you have going on right now?
I've got Arcadia going on. I've got this other book, the Syndicate, going on. I'm on Facebook. I stay off Twitter. And yeah, that's basically it. And I guess the book's pretty much anywhere you buy a book.
All right, well, there you have it. It's a really, really good book. I'm pretty sure the great majority of this audience will go ahead and check out this book. So, this has been another edition of the Wu-Tang Podcast. I'm Syndicate Superior. You can check us out at Wu-Tang Podcast on Twitter, WuTangPodcast.com, and we are out. Peace.